Good day. Welcome to another episode of Fighting Men of Rhodesia. My guest today is Flight Lieutenant Michel Siggy Seegmuller, Rhodesian Air Force and pilot beyond Rhodesian, yes. I'm so chuffed to have him on board because it's been difficult to get pilots to come and tell their story. So I really want to thank you for doing this, Siggy. I think we're going to have an interesting talk ahead of us. And so welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tony, and it's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be on this program. I've seen a lot of the episodes on YouTube, and I'm very humbled.
That's great. It's just to keep our history alive, to say thank you to our guys that never made it, and to honor them, and just to keep our history fresh, and to show the rest of the world that we weren't the complete monsters that they've made us out to be in many cases. So I think it's an important reason for us maintaining this program. And can you, which is the basic standard on here, is to give us an overview of where you came from, where you went to school, and how you ended up in the Air Force?
Okay, very good. So my father moved from Belgium to the Belgian Congo in 1952. And he met my mom there. I was born in 1958 in a little place called Bukavu, right in the northeast of Democratic Republic of the Congo, as it's now called. In 1960, we were given, the African hello, goodbye. We had to leave because I think his name was Chombe. He came into power and he booted us colonials out. And so my father drove down all the way to Cape Town, and my mom and I flew to Belgium, came back and met him in Cape Town, and he started his new life. He was a restaurateur, and my mom was a hairdresser. He started a restaurant there. It didn't work so well. Eventually, in 1969, he moved his family to Salisbury. I went to school there, various junior schools, because he hopped around looking for suitable employ. And so, but I went to high school at Allen Wilson Technical High School. Loved it. Still know the war cry. And he opened his restaurant there called Chirurgie Le Français. I know a lot of people knew about that restaurant at the time. And he did very well for himself. Whilst I was at school, and I can't remember what form I was in, maybe Form 4, something like that, Squadron Leader Alan Cockle, I don't know if you remember that name.
Yep.
He was doing the PR work, and he came and gave us a chat. And I'll never forget, he held this 30mm round from a Hunter Aiden cannon, and he dropped it onto the floor. And all the guys sitting in front, they just died for cover, thinking this thing was going to explode. Anyway, long and the short of it is he definitely got my attention, and I applied to join the Air Force, and I got in, went through selection, and in 1977, that's where we started.
And what intake was that? And do you remember any of the names of your peers?
Definitely. It was number 31 pilot training course. And I had guys like Guy Dixon with us, Mark Stoles, Mark Kleinans, Jerry Skeels, who else was there? Alistair Middleton, he was quite well known, Pat Richards, and Bud Cocroft was my senior course, and he was, of course, very well known. Bless him.
Give us an overview of day one, leading up to actually getting in a cockpit.
Good question, Tony. You're testing me now. I remember day one, we met at the Salisbury train station. And from there, we jumped on the overnight train down to Gwelo, as it was at the time. Mm-hmm. And we started straight away into ground training school at Thornhill with Bob Meacham as our PTI DI. And yeah, we remember him so well. We loved him, but we also feared him.
To what extent did you have to do drill and sort of what you would call soldering stuff? Was that just swept away very quickly to get into the pilot training?
Through the first 6 months, we did all of that stuff. The first 6 weeks, of course, were being revved and doing all that lacquer military stuff by our senior course. And but we continued doing drill and uh, training exercises on the ground. We, for example, at one stage, we did a survival course with the scouts at Wafa Wafa. And we did numerous things with School of Infantry just to keep us in the loop of what was going on.
Okay. And then how did it filter into classroom work and eventually sitting in the cockpit?
Yes. So it was structured as initial training school, ITS, then basic flying school, which was flying the Janet, and then advanced flying school, where we flew Impalas. You may recall we used to send a detachment down to Durban. It was all hush hush at the time, but anyway. So the initial training school was 6 months of just academic stuff, just academic stuff. So that was intense. And then finally, after 6 months, you get to start your basic flying on the Janet. And if I remember correctly, I went solo after 16 hours or something like that. That was more or less the norm. And yeah, then it just went from one stage to the other.
What type of aptitudes did they look for during that period? Was it obviously somebody that could read A to Z, you know, had a quick brain, uh, passed exams that were going through there? How did they sort of weed you out? What was the process of weeding you out of there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just backtrack a little bit. When we did selection, we went down to Pretoria to MMI, Military Medical Institute, and they did to us every single test known to man. Jeez. Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Where they, for example, the one, if I remember correctly, they put you in this completely darkened box, and it's on a gyro, so you control it. And they put you at a dizzy angle, and you have no reference to anything outside there, and you need to try and drive it back to the straight and level thing. So all those sort of physiological things they tested you on, and of course, without having to say this, eyes, ears, all that sort of stuff. That was standard. When we started initial training, there was a couple of guys that washed out there, but that was due to discipline issues, not inability of anything to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And tell us that time you first sat in a cockpit, even with your instructor there. What did that feel like?
I was nervous because even though they prepared you on the ground for everything that you can expect, we in those days instruction was not at all like it is today. Today it's a gentle way of getting the message across. There, some of the guys had like a crowbar and they'd hit you not on your head, on the helmet, but it was very, very disconcerting. And many times you had to run back from the end of the runway because you hadn't had a good sortie. So yeah, and but yeah, they toughened us up, and then you just learned to accept whatever was coming.
And then the day arrived of your first solo. How many layers of underpants did you have on for that one?
No, that was actually it was lovely. You're so into it that there's no fear, and you just get up there. The only thing is, of course, you're saying to yourself, "Please God, don't let me screw up." And yeah, just get up. We did one. I think we went into the general flying area, and then we came back and did one circuit with a practice approach and one circuit to land, and that was it. It was
And that was
great.
in Durban or back in Salisbury?
That was at Thornhill
Mhm.
on the Simon Shetty SF-260.
Oh,
They were
right.
brand new aircraft.
Yeah.
Our senior course, they'd still had to do that phase of flying on the old Provost, personal Provost.
Hmm.
But they were very much aging, and they scrapped them, most of them, and we got these brand new sanctions busted SF-260s from Italy. So it
I'm
was really
surprised those Italian aircraft, I will put a picture up that John will place, but I'm surprised they were never used in the ground attack role because they were lovely, versatile aircraft that had a good canopy vision and could carry a fair load. Why were they
yeah.
restricted to just being training aircraft, do you think?
In actual fact, there were two. There was the SF-260B, which is the one we trained on, and they also had a squadron of SF-260. They call them W for Warrior, and limited capacity. They had pods which could either carry 6 six rockets, sorry, in the matropod, and did they have 303s also in a pod? So, but the problem was because it's such a small and light airplane, and the wing loading is relatively high. It's in low level. It's very susceptible to being tossed around. So it's not a very stable weapons platform.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was your first posting, Siggy? Once you qualified, where did you go?
Yeah, so we did the 6 month training on jets in Durban. Then we came back and we were given our wings. And then they had asked us where you would like to be posted. And of course, we had to be realistic. We knew that the majority would go to helicopters, and so 7th Squadron and 4th Squadron on Lynxes. But I said, you know what? I don't mind where I go, but for the love of flying, I really would love to fly the Hunter. And blow me down. 2 of us got it. Guy Dixon and myself. We went straight onto Hunters. It wasn't a popular decision amongst the senior flight lieutenants, I must say.
Gee,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. What a privilege.
Oh, indeed. We were, oh man, we were so very, very lucky. And I mean, as you said earlier in our pre-brief, that Hunter is just the most amazing machine to fly. Anyone who's flown it will just, there's nothing to say. It's just the most beautiful airframe with a wonderful engine and a power to weight ratio and wonderful controls. Lovely to fly, every minute of it.
It's by far my most favorite aircraft. And, when I hear one of those dive and come over a runway, that blue note, oh,
Yeah.
man, it makes the hairs on my arms stand up. It's absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, that blue note is something special. Yeah.
Before I came on to interviewing you, some guy told me, he wasn't sure, but you can clarify it. Did the Hunter aircraft actually have an ejection seat, or did you have to invert to get out?
No, the Hunter was equipped with a Martin Baker Mark IV ejection seat. Yeah, I used it once. So
Really?
yeah.
All right. We'll come to that story, I'm sure. So if we could move forward to your first operational posting, if you could start giving us some overviews of what you actually experienced during the war.
Yes. So we came to 1 Squadron in 1978, August 1978. Guy Dixon and myself, were the JPs, the junior pilots on the squadron. We were not operational at the time of Green Leader raid into Lusaka. So unfortunately, we were not part of that. But thereafter, then we started doing strikes, and we were always paired with a senior flight lieutenant. Mostly I was with Tony Oatley, sorry, and no, Oakley. Oakley's my other friend. And Guy Dixon was mostly paired with Ginger Baldwin.
Right.
Who I think has been on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, it was very busy in those last 18 months or 2 years of the war, as you know. So we did a lot of flying, and we went straight into the deep end, of course.
Mm. Can you give us an overview of some of the actual operations you did and what you saw, what you felt, even if you can name the operations like Op Miracle or any of the others, if you could just give us an overview on those.
Yeah, I can. One of my most vivid memories as a junior pilot, and being the junior of the junior pilots, my name starts with S and Dixon's with D, so he was always ahead of me. I was tail end Charlie, and we had done on this raid into, I think it was to Mulungushi, just by Lusaka, the big dam where there was a training camp. And I remember so well, we had joined up with the Canberras within Rhodesian airspace, and there were 4 or 6 cans. And so we slowed down to formate with them because they had superior navigation equipment. And by this time we were low level. And I remember crossing Kariba. And as we crossed on the other side, I could see this whole, it was awesome. All these airplanes loaded with munitions. And we crossed into Zambia, and there was a farmer on his tractor, and he was waving at us. It's like, yeah. Anyway, and then so how that worked is the cans. There was a pre-selected go point where they would say to the hunters, go. And then we'd select max continuous thrust, accelerate away, climb to 10,000 feet, which was our perch, drop normally our golf bombs, 1,000-pound golf bombs, but sometimes medium capacity bombs as well. And that would be the markers for the cans. And they would run in on those strikes. And it was all very tight timings. You had to be spot on. So because of course if you were late in releasing your bomb, the cans are coming in now. So it worked a treat though. And remember, those were days when no GPS, 1 in 50,000 at 7 miles a minute. Yeah, we did it somehow.
That was the Green Leader raid, was it?
No, it was after Green Leader. There was a training camp on the shores of, I think it was Mulungushi Dam. It's probably, yeah, and yeah.
And then I think, didn't the RLI and the other guys come over and actually attack the camp on the ground?
I do believe they did. We did the initial strike to soften the targets, and then, yeah, off we went back home.
What can you actually see from a pilot's point of view when you're going in? Obviously, you're not seeing guys standing there saying, here I am. What do you look for? How do you find your target?
Yeah, good question. Because the perch is at 10,000 feet above ground, that's pretty high already. And you turn in, it's a 60-degree dive, very, very steep, on the golf bomb profile, that is. And now you're going down, and at 4,500 feet is the release height. And there was a little light in the cockpit that would illuminate. Now, by then, you've got your photo that Jispis would have given us, and with your specific target for the golf bombs. And now you've located it, you've focused on the target, and you release the bombs, pull up. We had to make a 2,000 feet safety height because of the shrapnel, danger of shrapnel strike. And then after 2,000 feet, baleka, get out of there. So it's very clinical, really. Only on once or two occasions did I see actual people running. Mostly it was, you see the target area, you drop the bomb, and you're gone. It's very quick.
Did you liaise with forward observation guys, SAS, Police Scouts that were in hiding? Did they help you in any way?
Quite, not so much directly from the ground, but because the GAC, ground air control, would normally speak to the links if there was a links around, and then the links would do the forward air controlling for us. So that's how that normally worked.
Right. Interesting. I should imagine when you drop in a bomb that's heavy, there's quite a lurch when it leaves your plane.
Yeah, you're in a very steep dive, so you don't really feel it releasing from the aircraft. But once the bombs are gone, then the aircraft now acts like a different machine because it's got much less drag, much less weight, and yeah.
What risk was there from the Zambian Air Force? Were they interested in getting involved or not at all?
They were, well, they didn't want to mix it, but a couple of times they were scrambled. And in those days, they had a DC-3 that was equipped with all sorts of listening equipment. It's called Warthog. And often Norman Walsh was in there controlling the whole show. And the one time they said, they've launched some MiGs from Mumbwa, the air base there. And we actually saw them. And there were two MiG-19s, and of course, much more performance than we had, especially laden with bombs. And we saw them crossing the horizon, and they saw us, but there were two of them and 8 of us. They didn't come and mix it.
No, that's the spider's web. Crumbs.
Yeah.
And did you have air-to-air missiles at that point, or did they only come in later?
We always had one pair of hunters designed for top cover. And those hunters were equipped with it was called the V3 missile, a South African dogfight missile, not a rear sector missile. Very, very effective. We practiced with them. We never fired them, but we practiced with them often, and they had this helmet sight as well. So if you were engaging the target, and let's say you couldn't quite bring your nose to bear, you could press a button on the control column, and it would now enable helmet sight, and you had a little reticle reflected onto the visor of the helmet, and you could just turn your head. So the airplane can't put its nose there, but you could tilt your head, and once it acquired the heat signature, it was heat seeking, it would growl. You'd press another button, and now the head of the missile was locked on there, and then you can release that whenever. You can fire whenever. It was magic. We felt very, very strong with that thing.
I would love to have that growl on my cell phone as my dial-up tune. Fantastic. Now, tell me, you must have been in some operations where you'd formed almost like a relay, like maybe in Mozambique or something. How quickly could your ground crew rearm and rebomb to get back into action?
They were, our armors were amazing. But so the Hunter specifically, it's got 4 30-millimeter cannons that are integral in the fuselage, and the barrels stay with the airplane. They just disconnect the barrel, but the whole gun pack with the ammunition and the moving parts comes down. They bring in another one, jack that up, and so that's done. That can be done in 10 minutes. Bombs would obviously take longer to load up, but then you also got to refuel. So you could turn a Hunter around in, I'd say 30 to 45 minutes.
That's remarkable. So you'd be back in action very quickly, but you as a human being might be getting thirsty, tired. Do you nip off and have a quick dump in the toilet or a quick meal? What happens to you? Do you sit in the cockpit and wait, or what?
No, you'd have time to get out of the cockpit, go and, I don't know, do whatever you need to do, loose stop, and then just something to drink, I guess, and then go out again. It was quite tiring, especially the Mozambique raids, because they were quite a long way off. It'd take you like maybe 30 minutes to get there, maybe not as long as that, but I can't remember. It was such a long time ago. And then you're loitering overhead until your fuel reserves were such that you had to come back. They were long days. They were long days. And of course, if you're doing gunnery profiles and that's you're pulling G all the time, it was tiring.
I had a fantastic recording done by an RLI mortar troopy guy of the Hunters attacking the mountain at Tremoyo, a casino, and
Yes.
the 30mm cannons. Oh, and the 2,000 pounders dropping and the bangs from that, and the amount of return fire from AKs from the guys on top of the hill. But what I noticed is that the AKs got fewer and fewer and fewer. They were not so keen on facing those 30mm rounds and the bombs. And sadly, my daughter is one of those old CD tapes. She picked it up to tape record a phone call with her boyfriend, and that was the end of that recording. So
that's a shame.
I wish I'd been. If there are any guys out there listening to this who have that recording or something similar, I'd be ever so grateful to put it back into my library. Give us a view of some of the low-level attacks that you did. Where did you ever see? I've watched the Vietnam movies where you see the tracer coming up. It's sort of elliptical. It doesn't quite reach you. And did you experience that type of thing?
Yes, and in fact, you mentioned Monte Cassino. That very strike, John Annan he was my leader. He was a supernumerary pilot on the squadron, so very courageous. I mean, these guys used to fly, maybe once a month, twice a month, and now we're going into action. Anyway, John Annan was a great guy, and off we went. And it was getting dusk, and it was very hazy, and we had done one strike with 30mm on the top of Monte Cassino. And no, correction, sorry, I stand correct. We dropped golf bombs, and then we were still loitering. And then suddenly the ground guys said, "Come, they're scurrying all over the place. Come now." So we turned back, and John Annan said, "Select 4," and I selected 4 guns. You could select 2 or 4 guns on the Hunter. Normally, I mean, you would never need 4. It was specifically designed for air-to-air combat, the 4 guns, because that's 80 rounds per second.
Wow.
It's and they're 30 mil, you know. So anyway, and we went down the dive, and I remember seeing John and his strikes, and they were a mix of high explosive and semi armor piercing. So these rounds against the granite were just so effective. I mean, it must have been carnage down there. We didn't see anything, but and then we pulled out, and that was one of the very few times that we saw, because it was getting dark, all this tracer coming at us.
Mm.
And the ground guys are saying, they're shooting at you, they're shooting at you. And I said, I can't hear them, I can't see them. But they say that tracer, it's the one that doesn't move. That's the
Yeah.
one you got to watch out. If it's
Yeah.
moving, he's already missed you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the mortar round, the one you don't hear, it's the one that kills you.
Yeah.
Gee, was that to what extent does four guns firing actually act like a brake? Do you feel a reduction in speed?
Good point. Yes, there was a limitation on the aircraft that you were not allowed to fire four with speed 150 knots or less. You would never do that anyway, but that was an aircraft limitation, because when you're going down the dive, and I remember that specifically, firing four guns, got the target, the pipper on the target. Once you fire four, it goes all over the place. The airframe shudders, and it's mayhem.
Beautiful aircraft.
Yeah.
Gee.
Yeah, yeah.
If you were in multiple aircraft attacks, what were your tactics to avoid collision amongst yourselves? Did you always brake to the port, starboard? What was your plan?
Yeah, it would depend on where the actual targets were. So, for example, we'd have 8 aircraft, and you'd have Red lead, perhaps Vic Whiteman and his number 2 going on the northernmost targets. They'd try and spread them that way, so that when on the pull out, the recovery, you wouldn't obviously, ding into each other. And you would pull 6G to recover, and then break away, and then go low level to escape any small arms fire.
Yeah, yeah. And were you involved in the ones down at Mapai? There was quite a lot of action down that way. I remember on one occasion there was a massive convoy that the enemy had hidden under trees, but the reflection of a windscreen alerted the pilots, and they shot that column to pieces. But did you have any sort of memories of action in that area?
Yes, yes. Again, that was a huge operation, the Mapai one, wasn't it? The 3rd of October 1979 was a terrible day in the Rhodesian Air Force calendar. Brian Gordon, he was 1 year senior to me, and it was unusual. We were short-staffed. Unusual that an air lieutenant and actually, it might have been a flight lieutenant. I was an air lieutenant on our way to the target area, and we were given a target description by the Lynx pilot. I think it was Mike Hewson. And unusually, normally the SOP would be you go down as a pair, so that the wingman is not that close to your number one. But quite often you could see something scurrying in the bush, or people firing at you. Then you could release some 30 mil and keep their heads down while your leader was just focusing on the target. But this is all very quick timings. And that day, for whatever reason, I will never know, Brian Gordon said to me, stay in the perch at 1,500 feet above ground, above small arms fire. And he went down. So I was orbiting, and in my orbit, as he went down the dive, I was exactly in his 6 o'clock position. So I could see him going down. I saw his rockets ignite in the pods. And then there was this almighty explosion. At the time when one would have expected the rockets to hit the ground, this huge explosion. And I thought, jeez, he's hit a fuel tank or something, And I even shouted over there. I said, yeah, good rockets, Brian. And anyway, so I was still waiting for him to join up. Called him several times on the radio. There was no response. And then I think I was in VHF comms with Grand Reef at the height that I was at. And it might have even been Al Thorogood who was in the operations room there. And he said, are you sure that was a fuel bowser? And I thought, geez, that's the first time I thought, wow, I thought it was, but I don't know. Anyway, they instructed me to go down to the same target area and do another attack. And I did the rocket projectiles, the 68 mm Matra. They told me to ripple, so I let them all go, 36 of them, and pulled out. And then by then, my fuel was such that I needed to get back to Thornhill. Nothing on Salisbury radar. They haven't seen anything. Couldn't raise him on anywhere, and that was very, very lonely ride home, I must say. I thought, geez, like, how can it be? You know?
Terrible.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion of what happened there, Siggy?
Again, it's my opinion, and I know there are other stories and other recounts of the event, but to me, I don't think he flew into the ground. It's quite possible to get target fixation, especially when the haze is so thick. It is possible. I don't dispute that, but if he had flown directly into the ground, I know there would have been fire there because the bush was, it was dry. There would have been fire. I would have seen some wreckage. I would have seen something. But even when I did my attack on the profile, there was nothing. There was no wreckage. There was no fire. So I'm of the opinion that he was shot. He was. They had 37 mil anti-aircraft at the time, and I think they lucky shot maybe, and they blew him out the sky.
You say that you did see rockets leaving the pods on his plane?
I did. I saw them ignite in the pods. So it would seem that he didn't get total target fixation. It seemed like a normal profile, but it's very difficult to tell. Very difficult to tell. But we also know, and you'll recall this, about an hour or maybe 2 hours later, a can came around and also attacked that same target.
Yeah.
And that was Kevin Pinky and JJ Stradham, and they also were shot out of the sky.
Yeah, Kevin was a good friend of mine from Churchill School. Very sad. I'm an outsider. I'm no expert. I'm just Joe Blog. My thought is that he took a direct hit on himself in the cockpit. That would explain why there was no ejection and no communication with you. And he just went in from that point.
That is possible. And then we discussed this after the fact. Of course, when they're on a bombing run, the navigator bomb aimer is right in the nose. He's nowhere near his ejection seat.
Yeah.
And whilst it will take him maybe a minute to get into his ejection seat, we were thinking that maybe Kev didn't want to eject and obviously lose control of the machine after ejecting, and rather wait for JJ to strap in and eject, and maybe they just left it too late.
Yeah. No, I was actually referring to Brian Gordon being hit with a round and not being able to eject or talk to you in any way.
I see. Yeah, that's feasible.
I do believe that Kevin Pinky tried to keep the aircraft airborne for some time, and that's like you said, waiting for Stradham to get into the seat. But a terrible loss. I'm slightly confused. That didn't happen over Mapai, did it? It was at the casino battle, Miracle?
I think it is. I think it was. I don't remember the name of the operation. I think you're right.
I'm also very hazy on that. I'm just speaking from rough memories. But going back to Mapai, what was your role in that attack?
Okay, at that stage, and again, this is not very clear about exactly what we did there, but it became almost a conventional type war, didn't it? It was quite different from our previous battles.
Very much so.
And and it involved all sections of the forces, from Scouts to RLI to Air Force and everything.
SAS.
So I can't clearly remember. I remember when the Puma went down. It was
terrible.
Yeah.
Now I know because it was so difficult to dislodge the tours there, or even Frelimo, that eventually Canberra's came in and gave them a birthday card. But were any of you guys, obviously when Canberra's go out, you always have top cover for them in case the Mozambique Air Force intercepted?
Yeah, if the threat was there, like into Zambia, definitely we would have top cover. At the time in Mozambique, they didn't have much air contingency that would affect the cans. So if we had the aircraft spare, we would be with them. providing top cover, but not always.
What was the most number of return runs you did in one day from one ongoing battle? Can you remember that?
Yeah, I think it was that Monte Cassino battle, and I think we did 4 runs there. We started first thing in the morning, and the last one was with John Annan. In fact, I lost sight of John Annan after that strike I was telling you about, and we came home individually. It was too dark to try and form up,
Yeah, that was a heck of a battle. What about the big one at Chimoyo? That was a very extensive camp spread over like 20 square miles or something.
Yeah,
Individual targets were hit, I believe, with lynxes, helicopters, hunters, everything. Were you involved in that one at all?
I was not actually. No, not there.
Right.
Yeah.
Boy, you've had a vast amount of experience on the hunters. Did you ever go into any other type of aircraft? Did they put you in choppers or any other type of plane, or was it hunters all the way through?
I was so very fortunate that I flew hunters from wings until I departed the Air Force. I did for a short stint fly the Lynx, but purely there was a Lynx stationed at Thornhill, and they needed somebody to fly it for whatever purpose,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed that. But otherwise, it was hunters and vampires, of course, when they were still flying around.
Did you ever shoot up any railway equipment coming up to the southwest corner of the country?
Yes, we did, and in fact,
Southeast rather, sorry. Yeah,
down in the southeast, yes,
yeah.
my Balahuta down there somewhere. Yeah, we did, and in fact, I'm not proud to say this, but one train that we killed had already been killed. Yeah,
Yeah.
we realized afterwards. Oh, we were told, no, that's an old target. You don't need to shoot that.
You wasted precious ammunition on steel wheels.
We did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Was there a shortage of ammo, or was it a plentiful supply?
There was shortage, and but more importantly than that, they were expensive. I think it was $30 for one round
Hmm.
of 30. Yeah, so to be used sparingly. Yeah,
And the firing rate per gun was what?
20 rounds per second per gun.
Good.
Yeah,
20 rounds a second.
20 rounds per second. It's I mean, with 4 guns, it's almost as the rate of fire is almost as great as that of that Gatling gun that they have in the A10, but that's 6,000 rounds per minute.
Oh, good
But still,
Lord.
this is 1950s equipment.
Yeah, what a stunning aircraft. I see
Yeah.
the Swiss are still using it, but in the ground attack role, and other nations are as well. What about spare parts? Were you ever at a point where you couldn't fly because a wheel hub was missing or something?
No, no. The engineers were amazing. They really were. I remember one day we had we had a early morning strike. I don't even remember to where it was, but we only had 9 hunters then, and all 9 got airborne. All 9 released their bombs. We came back to base, turned the aircraft around, and 2 hours later we were doing 26th of June, the opening of Parliament. 9 ship fly past, Diamond 9. I mean, 9 out of 9 twice. Yeah, it was just amazing.
Unreal.
But yeah, of course, with sanctions applied against us, one night I was taxiing out to do night flying, just currency night flying. And when I got to the end of the runway, the procedure was you open up to 6,800 RPM, make sure the brakes were holding, and then release brakes, and off you go. My machine would not accelerate to 6,800 RPM. It would get to about 4.5, and I thought, something very wrong with this. And so I said, okay, no, I have to go back to base. And actually, I flamed out on the way taxiing back in. So, so lucky, man. So lucky because,
Yeah.
yeah. And because sanctions were applied against us, there was a modification to something in the fuel system. And it was a little bevel gear, just a small little thing, but the bevel gear was faulty. And Rolls-Royce never informed Rhodesia about this. Yeah, so we were very lucky then. Yeah,
Wow.
I was. Yeah.
I was amazed to learn that things as sophisticated as the turbine blades were made in Rhodesia. I mean, that's a skill that's unbelievable.
Yeah. What was it called? ERS, engine repair section at New Serum. They performed miracles. The Avon engine, when it came out from there, was rated at 10,150 pounds. Sometimes it was getting better thrust than nominal.
Yeah, yeah. And I believe the turnaround time and that type of thing left many Brit observers open-mouthed. They couldn't believe what was going on.
They couldn't.
Mm,
They couldn't. And we had, I mean, the Rhodesians were very intuitive and ingenious in some of their sanctions busting things. Not so much sanctions bustings, but coping with sanctions. For
mm,
example, the Canberra had those cartridges to start the engines.
yeah.
Powder cartridge, yeah. Those also A, expensive, B, very hard to source.
Hmm.
And so they came up with an alternative, and they just used they modified a compressed air cylinder to start the engine like that. Of course, that would only be at your home base because you had to have these big bottles of air. But it was better for the engines, of course, a fraction of the cost. And yeah,
I suppose when things are readily available, you don't bother about fixing things. We didn't have readily available. It's like here in England, if I bang in the front left quarter of my car, you'd just go in and they'd change the whole panel.
yeah,
Where we would have to take it off and panel beat it and mold it and repaint it. And I think that type of skill became endemic in the whole country, where we could fix things because we didn't have them there.
correct,
Mm.
correct. And we all wore the same boxer shorts from OK Bazaars and Fellies from Bata.
Yeah, and handmade webbing sets for us army guys. So
Yeah.
tell us, how did you navigate in the day and at night? Tell us the two differences.
Okay, so daytime, in the operational mode, let's say you were going to do a strike, you would start off on a 1 in a million map. And that would take you to an IP, an initial point. And that initial point would be something, we're talking daylight now, would be a very discernible feature, like a real kink in the river or a railroad crossing at the junction. Easy to find, and well, it was a initial point. You could not mistake it for something else. There we go. Then from there, the run-in would be 1 in 250,000. And it was a bit of a waste, but you didn't have space in the cockpit. So we had to cut these maps up so that you had like 10 miles on either side of your track. Otherwise, you just.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the final run in, which was probably about 1 minute, which took over 6 maps, it was 1 in 50,000. But I mean, it was it was so fast. The features were hard. By that time, you're going time and heading, man, time and heading, and then pull up on your perch. And then the photograph was the final thing. At night, of course, we didn't do night strikes. So navigation at night, you'd have to use whatever beacons were around, ND non-directional beacons, and features, well lit up things. And yeah,
Or
yeah, that
or
was it.
flares put on the ground, spatial flares, where you mark
We
the distance. But that was mainly Canberra's, wasn't it?
Yeah, Canberra's used that, and of course the Lynxes. They used to do single line flares landings. That
Mm.
was very brave.
Go, go, Going back to your daylight navigation, you could make a lovely cartoon of a pilot in the cockpit with all these maps, and he's trying to yeah, trying to change them, and there's a ruddy great big mountain in front of him or something like that. But
Yeah, yeah.
no, man, I really admire you guys, and I really think it takes a certain person. I was in a chopper once going on a fire force delivery, and I was sitting behind the pilot, and ahead of us was this wall of granite, and there was the pilot map reading. He had pulled a map out of his leg there, and he's map reading, and I'm thinking, rock,
Um,
granite, yeah, tap, tap, hello, hello. And he didn't even look up, man. He just pulled up the collective and, over the top. And casual guys, I think the jealousy from us Browns is that you always had bacon and eggs, and we were tucking into bully beef. But I guess, I guess, I guess you deserved it, eh?
yeah, and we were even more spoiled. I'm afraid. We were always having a cup of tea after the strike.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The funniest thing I had with my cup of tea in the army once is that the packets were never labeled, so I ended up eating my tea because I'd use the powder for potato instead of the milk. Oh, yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
excellent. Now, how did you? I heard, well, from our brief chat beforehand that you actually stayed on in the Zimbabwean Air Force. Take us through a bit of that. How did you feel about it emotionally? How did you feel having to salute a former terrorist leader? What was that like?
Yeah. So again, a good question. I found that transforming from an operational wartime Air Force to now a peacetime Air Force, it's a real challenge because suddenly, you've got no purpose anymore. Your raison d'être is no longer. And yeah, and so the Air Force put up these big exercises. Like we had an air-to-air firing camp at Wankie, and we had big inter-squadron exercises to keep us motivated and going. We, because the Air Force is such a specialist force compared to, let's say, the Army,
Yeah.
with respect, it would not be, we were not harassed at all. And in fact, we all know that sabotage at Thornhill was one of the reasons was because the Air Force continued operating. It was a very viable squad. So we, until the 5th Brigade came, we never were hassled, or it was just coping with boredom and your reason for being. That was the biggest challenge.
Were you involved in the Intimbani battle in 80 and 81, 81, 82?
No, I wasn't, and I can't remember why, but it's possible that I was on leave. I might have been in Canada at the time. Yeah,
Yeah. What year did you leave, or what month of what year did you leave, Siggy?
I stayed in the Air Force until September '83. Yeah, I got married on the 3rd of September, and then 2 weeks later, I was flying hunters in Somalia.
Wow, man. It must have been quite an emotional thing to actually leave and walk out the camp for the last time. What did you feel about that?
Yeah, I really I didn't want to leave, but after the sabotage, it became no, you just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So, and I had nothing to go to flying wise, so I was actually going to join my father in the restaurant business and leave flying. Um, and yeah, that's what my plan was. And then just out of the blue, a guy called Harry Holcroft, who was the senior technician at Airworks in Salisbury. They used to do the servicing of the hunters, so I knew him very well. And he said to me out of the blue, he said, "Hey, Shorts," he used to call me Shorts. "Short, do you want to go flying hunters in Somalia?" And I said, "What? Somalia?" Quite honestly, I wasn't even certain where Somalia was. And I said, "Well, tell me more." And long story cut short, we went up and had a look there. And yeah, I took it. I thought I must do this. And so I did not go and join my father in the restaurant business.
So tell us briefly about that experience in Somalia. What was that all about? Who were you flying for, and who were your opposition?
Okay, so sorry, this is verging away from Rhodesia, but anyway, it's
No, it's
still
all right. In
pertinent.
fact, we like guys talking about the afterlife because well, it sounds like you've been resurrected. But no, some of our guys have had the most incredible careers after the Air Force or the Army or whatever. And I think it's
I've
pertinent
lost
to your character. Yeah.